feel like I really understand that we have a responsibility to change the narrative around what we...
Nobody put Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi on a list. No royal correspondent flagged him as someone to watch, no palace insider leaked his name, and no gossip column had a file on him before the relationship became public. He just appeared, standing beside Princess Beatrice of York at a charity event in March 2019, dressed immaculately, entirely unbothered by the cameras, and looking for all the world like a man who had always belonged exactly there. What followed that first photograph was a press scramble to understand who this person actually was, and the more journalists dug, the more complicated the answer became. Because Edoardo is not a simple story about a wealthy man marrying well. He is a hereditary count with a business empire worth hundreds of millions, a son from a broken engagement, a wedding that the world didn't know was happening until it was already finished, and a front-row seat to the biggest royal scandal in a generation. All of that, and he still manages to be the least dramatic person in the room. That is not charm. That is a skill. Born on the 19th of November, 1983, at the Portland Hospital in London, Edoardo arrived into a family whose history stretched back centuries in ways that most people's family trees simply don't. The Mapelli Mozzi name carries a hereditary title, Count of the Kingdom of Italy, granted in 1913 by King Victor Emmanuel III to all male descendants of the line. Italy abolished its monarchy in 1946, stripping those titles of any legal standing. But heritage doesn't require a legal framework to carry weight, and the Mapelli Mozzi family had never needed government recognition to understand who they were. The ancestry reportedly traces back to a son of King Federico II of Sicily, which means this is not a family that emerged from money or ambition in the conventional sense. This is a family that existed before the countries around them had taken their current shape. The Villa Mapelli Mozzi in northern Italy stands as the physical expression of that lineage, a 15th-century estate that began as a monastery and now operates as a luxury retreat. Growing up with that kind of backdrop, even partially, reshapes a person's sense of what counts as impressive and what counts as ordinary. Edoardo's father, Alessandro Mapelli Mozzi, added his own layer of improbability to the family story. Born in Argentina, raised in Italy, educated in England, and talented enough as an alpine skier to represent Great Britain at the 1972 Winter Olympics. After competition, Alessandro became an international art dealer and earned fellowship of the Royal Society of Arts. His mother, Nikki Williams Ellis, built her own career across politics, charity, and design. These were not people who watched things happen. They made things happen, and Edoardo absorbed every bit of that disposition growing up. The Dragon School in Oxford shaped his early years, then Radley College, then a master's degree in politics from the University of Edinburgh. And by the time he graduated, every door worth walking through was open to him. What nobody expected was that he would build his own door entirely. At 23 years old, Edoardo founded Banda Property in 2007, a high-end development and interior design company targeting London's luxury market. The idea was to identify undervalued pockets of the city, transform them into exceptional homes, and sell them to buyers for whom price was never the first question. What that idea became, over the following decade and a half, was a machine. By the time British tabloids were photographing him at royal weddings, Banda had overseen developments valued at over $875 million, which is the kind of number that stops being a business figure and starts being a statement about who a person is. Banda's identity was built around a very specific visual language, sleek interiors, obsessive spatial detail, and an aesthetic that treated luxury not as excess but as precision. Edoardo, who later disclosed his dyslexia, a condition he and Beatrice share, channeled his intelligence entirely into the visual world, because that is where his mind works best, and the results speak clearly. His social media presence reads less like property marketing and more like an architecture publication, each project looking assembled by someone who finds compromise genuinely difficult. Along the way, he wrote opinion pieces for industry publications, criticized politicians by name on social media, and weighed in on both the 2016 London mayoral election and the American presidential race that same year. That level of public opinion sharing sits at a considerable distance from the careful silence expected of anyone orbiting the British royal family, and, at the time, Edoardo hadn't yet learned he would need to recalibrate. That's when Dara Huang enters the story, and her chapter deserves more than the footnote it usually gets. A Harvard-educated American architect with an international career and a profile entirely her own, Dara and Edoardo built something real together across several years. The engagement came around 2014, and in 2016 their son arrived, Christopher Wolf Mapelli Mozzi, known to everyone who has ever encountered a photograph of him as Wolfie. By 2018, the engagement was finished. Neither Dara nor Edoardo has ever chosen to make the specifics of that breakdown public, and the dignity of that silence is worth acknowledging in a media environment that rewards the opposite. What they chose instead was a functional co-parenting arrangement that has, by every available account, actually worked, which is rarer than people admit. Wolfie's existence complicated every clean narrative about Edoardo's transition into royal life, and it complicated it in entirely the right ways, because Wolfie didn't fade into the background when his father began a relationship with a princess. He was woven into the new family from the start, and Beatrice embraced that role with a consistency that has drawn genuine admiration from people watching from the outside. Dara, for her part, built her own company, HB Design Group, and kept building her career independently. Christmas 2025 found Wolfie in Florida with his mother, posting cheerful photos at mini-golf, while Edoardo was in Palm Beach that same week attending a design conference. Two people in the same city, raising their son across two households without public friction. That takes sustained effort to maintain, and they maintain it. None of that, though, is the most dramatic chapter in this story. That belongs to the wedding that was planned and then the wedding that quietly replaced it. The original plan was everything a royal occasion is supposed to be, the Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace on the 29th of May 2020, a proper ceremony followed by a reception in the gardens of Buckingham Palace, with all the coverage and commemorative machinery that comes attached. And then November 2019 arrived, which meant Prince Andrew's BBC interview arrived, which meant everything changed. 2 months after the engagement announcement, Andrew sat across from Emily Maitlis and gave an interview about his relationship with convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein that became, almost immediately, one of the most damaging pieces of television in modern royal history. The fallout stripped him of his royal duties almost overnight, and the consequences landed directly on Beatrice's wedding plans. A smaller ceremony began to feel not like a preference, but like the only responsible choice. And then the COVID-19 pandemic removed even that version of events. On the 17th of July 2020, Beatrice and Edoardo married at the Royal Chapel of All Saints at Royal Lodge in Windsor, with only immediate family present. No advance notice reached the press. Nobody outside the immediate circle knew it was happening until the photographs were released afterward. What should have felt like a loss, all that grand planning reduced to a private ceremony in the middle of a locked-down world, became something else entirely. Beatrice wore a gown belonging to Queen Elizabeth II, a vintage ivory silk taffeta piece designed by Norman Hartnell in 1962, originally worn by Her Majesty to the premiere of Lawrence of Arabia. She paired it with the Queen's diamond fringe tiara, the same one Elizabeth had worn on her own wedding day back in 1947. A ceremony stripped of nearly every planned element somehow ended up containing the two most historically weighted objects in the entire royal wardrobe. Prince Andrew walked his daughter down the aisle and then disappeared from every official photograph. acknowledged in private, absent from the public record. The message was clear, and it was deliberate. Life after the wedding moved fast, and it moved in a direction that looked increasingly normal by royal standards, which itself counts as unusual. The couple established themselves in a 4-bedroom apartment at St. James's Palace, considered modest within the context of the family Beatrice was born into, then upgraded in late 2022 to a 6-bedroom converted farmhouse in the Cotswolds, valued at around £3.5 million, with tennis courts, extensive gardens, and an outdoor swimming pool. London through the week for schools and work, the countryside at weekends. Beatrice holds the title of Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at the software company Alpha Insights, and Edoardo runs Banda. These are people with actual jobs, which places them at a considerable remove from the traditional working royal model. Their income doesn't flow from the sovereign grant. They earn it. September 2021 brought Sienna Elizabeth Mapelli Mozzi into the world at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, and at birth she stood 11th in line to the British throne. After Queen Elizabeth II passed away in September 2022, Sienna moved to 10th. Then, in October 2024, the couple announced they were expecting again, and on the 22nd of January 2025, their second daughter arrived several weeks early. Athena Elizabeth Rose Mapelli Mozzi was born prematurely at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, and the experience affected Beatrice enough that she took on a new patronage with Born, a charity focused on ending premature birth globally, describing the situation as incredibly close and personal. Edoardo posted 3 clapping emojis under her public statement about the patronage. His support, apparently, runs best at low volume and high consistency. Athena's christening took place at the Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace in December 2025, the same location where so much of this family's story was always supposed to play out. Meanwhile, the Epstein shadow kept finding new angles from which to fall across the family. Documents released by the U.S. Department of Justice in 2025, part of the ongoing legal fallout from the Jeffrey Epstein case, surfaced emails referencing a 2011 phone call involving Sarah Ferguson and journalist Geordie Grieg, with Beatrice described as present during the conversation, no allegation attached to her name. Being mentioned in an email is not a charge, and the documents made no such claim. But proximity to that case, in that climate, carries its own weight, regardless of context. And the press coverage that followed reflected exactly that. Edoardo responded by attending a private lunch at Cornice, a Michelin-starred restaurant in Belgravia, posting about design on social media, and flying to Palm Beach for industry events. No statement, no visible disruption to his schedule, no sign that any of it reached him at a level he felt required acknowledgement. Andrew's situation continued deteriorating through this period. Royal Lodge, which he had occupied for years, became the subject of reported pressure from both King Charles and Prince William, and Andrew ultimately departed. His royal duties remained suspended. The titles and public roles that once defined his position within the House of Windsor have not been reinstated, and there is no current indication they will be. Beatrice and Edoardo navigate all of this without a script and without complaint. Andrew walked his daughter down the aisle, which places him within the circle of family regardless of everything else. And yet, he does not appear in the official photographs of that day. They have found a way to hold both of those things simultaneously, which takes a kind of emotional precision that doesn't get discussed enough. As of early 2026, Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi is 42 years old, the chief executive of Banda Property, husband of Princess Beatrice of York, and the father of Wolfie, Sienna, and baby Athena, across a blended family that spans 2 homes, 2 co-parents, and one genuinely amicable arrangement that most divorced couples spend years trying to achieve. The Cotswolds farmhouse serves as the family's weekend base. Nikki Williams Ellis, his mother, lives in Oxfordshire, keeping the extended family geographically close in the way that suggests where a person's actual priorities sit. Banda continues operating, continues building, and the collapsed Australian development, the Masthead Ocean Club on the Gold Coast that went into administration, remains the most prominent setback in a record that otherwise moves in one direction. Edoardo has not discussed it at length publicly. He showed up to a design conference in Palm Beach wearing a blush pink and powder blue suit, talked about architecture, posted about restaurants, and kept going. Beatrice made her first public appearance after Athena's premature birth at the Victoria and Albert Museum's Wonderland fundraising gala in early 2025, announcing the born patronage and standing beside her husband in photographs that told the story more efficiently than words. Two people who had been through something frightening, emerging together on the other side of it. The family photo that followed, Wolfie, Sienna, and newborn Athena, arranged across two parents who each bring a full life's worth of history to the picture, is the truest version of what this story actually is. Not a fairy tale, not a scandal, not a case study in royal image management. A family assembled from complicated pieces that chose to show up for each other consistently enough that the complicated pieces stopped defining it. Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi came into the British royal family carrying a hereditary Italian title, a property empire built from nothing, a son from a relationship that ended before this one began, and a track record of opinions expressed loudly before he understood the new rules of engagement. None of it disqualified him. None of it became the defining story. What defined the story was what he did after the quiet wedding in a locked-down world, after the Epstein documents put his wife's name in the news again, after the collapsed Australian project made the business pages, after the premature birth put his family through something frightening. He kept showing up, steadily, without announcement, in the blush pink suit or the school run or the Michelin-starred lunch that made the press photos anyway. For a family that has spent years struggling to find its footing, a man who simply keeps showing up turns out to be exactly what was needed.